All right, so I haven't done one about sports, or wrestling, or anything outside of games in a little bit. So I just figured I'd talk about it since we're nearing the end of the football season. Um, First of all, obviously prayers to that kid Hamlin the other day. I really hope he recovers. I've never really seen anything like that on a football field. I've seen injuries occur. I played some football. I didn't. I only played through high school, so I played middle school and high school. But even watching football on television, I've never seen anything like that happen. Um, I, I I wasn't watching the game, to be honest. I was watching. I flipped. I turned on the game very briefly in the beginning. I was watching a couple other things with my wife. I turned it back on, and I didn't really know what was going on. The crowd was really quiet, and the announcers were saying something about the ambulance. But then they went to commercial break. So I just went on Twitter and just saw like there was a couple of clips that some people had just posted and were, excuse me, retweeting. Um, so I was trying to figure out what had happened and who was hurt and whatever. And I guess in the midst of all that, I saw the hit or the tackle, and I was very confused. I thought it was the Bengals player that got hurt originally, but I just had never really seen anything like that before. So again, prayers to him. I hope he's okay. I really hope that I mean, this is a horrible thing that happened, and I hope it doesn't turn into anything worse. So hopefully he'll make a recovery, and obviously for his sake, I hope he can do whatever he wants to do with the rest of his life, whether that's to play football or just go home and just be with his family and friends and whatnot. But obviously like I said, I've never seen anything like that happen. I just hope he's all right. Um, but I guess just circling back to the rest of the league, going back to the weekend, Sunday, I guess in particular. Um, excuse me, a really interesting thing. The Giants clinched a playoff spot, and credit has to go to Shane and to Dayball, and honestly even to Mara, because you have to have good upper management to make this thing happen. But they really represent, what football can be without superstars. Barkley is a great player, but he hasn't been a superstar for the last 5 years. He's been, a great player who had great early moments, then injuries, and now has had some great moments again. But he hasn't been on the field dominating like a Tom Brady or someone like that who's just been around constantly making plays, Derrick Henry or anybody else. And being healthy is obviously such a huge part of it. But needless to say, you could make the argument the Giants have no superstars. They have some budding star players. I think Thibodeau's a budding star player. Ojulari has potential. Andrew Thomas is pretty good. Obviously, the quarterback. I'm a big fan of the quarterback, and we'll get to that. Barclay, but like you said, he hasn't always been around. But what the Giants have done, this is a very competitive league. It's a 7-point league now. Every game seems to come down to the final couple minutes. Doesn't matter if you have a top tier team playing a lower tier team by some kind of stat, ranking, or standing. That doesn't play out. What plays out week to week is that you'll have players of a you'll have a team, I should say, that is considered to be the upper crust, and that team will be favored by 5, 6 points, and they will have to scratch and claw at the end of the game to win the game by a field goal or a late touchdown. It's just a tight league. And some teams are going to win because they're blessed to have their best players healthy and they have a lot more talent than their opposition. But some teams are winning, aka the Giants, because they execute fundamental football at the highest level that they possibly can across the board. Not too dissimilar to what the New England Patriot teams were doing for many years. Now, granted, there were flashes of Patriot teams that had some superstars. Obviously, the quarterback. But they had Randy Moss for a brief moment. They had Gronkowski. They had a star-studded defense, although most people wouldn't consider them star-studded, but they were. They had Lawyer Malloy. They had Ty Law. They had Teddy Bruschi. They had Richard Seymour. They had some great, great players, but the Patriots were always good at taking players either on their own team or off other teams, off the practice squad, undrafted players, getting them in the building, getting them prepped and prepared to contribute on Sunday. So that regardless, if you're on the roster, whether you were the top pick or whether you were not drafted at all, if you wore the helmet, you could play. That's what these Giants are like. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to win 6 Super Bowls, but what I am saying is that with the great management that they have, if you give them a bunch of guys off the scrap heap, they will find a way to get something out of them. That's the most beautiful part of football. Basketball is a star-driven sport. There's only 5 people on the court for each team, and if you have a player who's capable of scoring 35, 40 points and getting 10 assists or any kind of over and above stat that sticks out, then he has to only be better than 4 other people on his own team and then 5 people on the other team. So if you have a star player who could score 30 to 40 points, well, the team is probably going to score about 100 points. So almost half of the points comes from one player. The rest of the team just has to scrap together the rest. In football, Daniel Jones could throw 3 touchdowns, but he doesn't block. He doesn't run the routes. He doesn't play defense. He doesn't play special teams. So you need so much more. And it's not 5-on-5. It's 11-on-11, but it's really 11 of yours, then 11 of special teams, a different 11 for another special teams, a different 11 for another special teams, and then defense and any other variety in a formation where obviously the 11 that's on the field, even on offense and defense, is not the same 11 for every play. So in reality, a team like the Giants, they're going to use the majority of their roster throughout the course of the game. There aren't going to be a ton of people who are just never going to see the field. Even players who aren't super productive, they might contribute in some way, shape, or form, not to mention the X factor, which is very high in football, that being injuries. People get hurt a lot. In basketball, a team like the Knicks, they have openly stated they have a 9-man rotation, at times 10 due to guys coming in and out of the lineup. But for the most part, it's a 9-man rotation. In football, you can't have a 9-man rotation. You can't run out 11 Hall of Famers and expect to win because there's no way those guys are going to all play. They're going to get hurt. So the Giants have achieved something that I think is very special in football, and that is they have used lesser talent to compete against better teams with more talent because they get the most out of more positions. They're the guys who take the 65 rated player and max him out up to about 70, 75 across the board versus the team that has a couple of 99 rated players, but they may or may not get hurt, and then there's huge gaps in other areas. Not to say they don't have problems. Of course they do. Do they need more talent? Yes. They will, and they'll work on that. Their general manager and their coach will draft and will continue to improve this team. But it's absolutely unquestionable, especially now that they've secured the playoff spot, that there is no better managed team than the New York Giants. No question. And that is absolutely worth pointing out because there are teams above them by talent and standings who have holes and who have been mismanaged over the course of the last 2, 3, 10, 20, 30 years. The Dallas Cowboys. The Minnesota Vikings. Yeah. So the Giants are in a position that I think is pretty special because, for a lot of fans, they might consider this house money. I don't think Brian Daboll thinks this is house money. I don't think Joe Shane thinks this is house money. I think they think, you know what? We're going to get into the playoffs, we're going to play a game, and we're going to expect to win like we do all the other games. This is not a house money situation. They want to win all their games, and they're not going to just get to the playoffs and just say, well, we achieved something, we made the playoffs. That's not enough. Just ask the Jets if that's enough. They didn't even make it. They're not even going to get to compete for a playoff spot in the last game of the year. And that team has more talent than the Giants. That team has more talent at receiver. They have stars all across that defense. And I'm still a believer in Mike White. I know that's a whole nother discussion. But I believe that Mike White can play. I think he's proven he can play. The guy played injured the other day, which I have a ton of respect for. But if you have a problem with the way he played, you could go to the coaches, you could go to the management and say, why did you even let him on the field when the guy was clearly injured and should not have been there? He should not have been there. But regardless, congratulations to the Giants on a well-deserved clinching playoff berth. Congratulations to the coaching staff, Wink Martindale, Brian Dable, obviously, just the whole staff, the general manager. I mean, there's really not a lot not to like. I mean, this really is a well-run machine, and they're only going to get better. That's going to take them a couple of years to get the cap space figured out, which is not their fault. But they're still going to draft well. They may need some players to work with them financially, to keep this team together. I mean, that might be part of it. They may need some guys to defer some money, et cetera, et cetera. But they will draft more, and I assume, based on what I've seen, that they will draft well. And remember, they got some players coming back next year that could be pretty big additions to them. Wan'Dale Robinson looked like a stud. He looked like an absolute stud. Give that guy an off season where he gets to work with the team, becomes more comfortable playing professional football, maybe builds up more chemistry with the quarterback. I mean, don't sleep on that guy. There's talent coming back. And my Lord, you put more talent on this team with these coaches? Woo! So, I just thought it bared saying. I just felt like spewing it out there. That it's impressive. I personally believe the best brand of football for a lot of teams, especially teams that you're just not going to luck out and get Aaron Rodgers. I'm sorry. If you can have an Aaron Rodgers fall into your lap, like the Green Bay Packers, right? They get Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers back to back. That's blessed. I mean, that's not realistic. Realistic is more like the Bengals, right? I mean, even a team like the Steelers. The Steelers get a guy like Roethlisberger. Now, that for one, they've had two coaches last, 40 years. But they get a guy like Roethlisberger who basically plays his whole career in one team with the Steelers, and he's always available. Same thing like with Eli, right? I mean, it's rare to get star quarterbacks and players who are so durable, especially ones that took a beating like him. But that's not the reality. Most teams are going to struggle to fill that position at quarterback. Like the Colts now. They had Peyton Manning all those years, then they had Andrew Luck for a little bit. And they're really dealing with reality now, which is that players are not going to come and go so easily. Quarterbacks don't just fall into your lap. So when you think about, look at the 49ers, same thing. And they've had success, but they haven't been able to secure one guy for that spot. The Giant formula, with the way that Daboll and Shane have worked it, that's how you can mitigate not necessarily having the top flight guy. And I'm not knocking Daniel Jones because I'm a fan of his. I think he's proven, just like I thought Mike White deserves to be the quarterback next year, I think Daniel Jones absolutely deserves to be the quarterback of the Giants. There's nothing else he can prove. He's been able to succeed with less. And to me, that is a quality that even some great quarterbacks, like even Aaron Rodgers, can't do that. And I'm not saying Jones is better than Rodgers. We all know Rodgers is one of the greatest. But let's be honest here. Rodgers bitches and moans about not having talent, and rightfully so. Rodgers doesn't necessarily have the best attitude when it comes to his fellow players. Rodgers is a great player, but he does not elevate and play well with lesser talent. He has to play with guys who are going to play at a high level or at his level. And Tom Brady really wasn't like that, and Daniel Jones isn't like that. Daniel Jones can play with guys who are coming off the practice squad, who are unsigned, who joined the team mid-season, and he can get a lot of production out of them or with them. And that's something that even an Aaron Rodgers doesn't do. That's a great quality to have. Why is that? I don't know. Is it because he spends more time with them in practice? I can't say. Is it because maybe the offense that they're running? I can't say. But the facts are the facts that some players, some quarterbacks can get a lot out of lesser talent, and some quarterbacks, they just fall apart when they don't have their stars. And this is a guy in Jones who's proven he could do a lot with less. And that's really what the Giants have done all season long. Then they've had guys like Thibodeau to come on. I mean, his second half, since he's really started to get healthy, looks amazing. Well, Jalari's come back. Jalen Smith. There's another guy who's had some serious injuries coming out of college, coming to the NFL when he got cut by the Cowboys. I mean, this guy has played an outstanding brand of linebacker for the Giants. I think he's their leading tackler. And he's another guy who I don't even think he was on the roster in the summer. So the parade doesn't end for this team and the way they keep pulling in players. We could talk about Hodgins. We could talk about Hudson and Bellinger. I know Bellinger's the number one tight end. I mean, let's be honest. He ain't Gronkowski, okay? He's not Travis Kelce. He's not Dallas Goedert, but he's solid. He runs routes well enough. He blocks well enough. What else do you want? Even the Giant offensive line. They've been beaten on the last couple of years. They've been okay this year. And on Sunday, they looked very good. A lot of clean pockets. And boy, imagine that. 6'5" quarterback who's tough as nails and who can, run like the wind, but you give him a clean pocket and he doesn't run around with a chicken without his head. He stands in the pocket, manipulates the pocket, and makes all the throws like a quarterback. He's not looking to just roll out to his right like a running back. And there's plenty of those type of quarterbacks coming out of college. There's a lot of guys coming out of college that fans fall in love with because they roll out to their right and they run like the wind, and they usually end up closing the field, limiting their options, and they just get lucky because in college, defenses aren't as good as they are in the NFL. But give me a guy who's 6'5", 200 plus pounds, who can manipulate the pocket and make all the throws all day long. Because that's professional high-level football. Not just some guy who can't wait to run out to his right. Because that move is very tired, and defenses have caught on to it. And there really hasn't been a running quarterback like that who's been able to win a Super Bowl. There's been some guys who've been able to compete, but the quarterbacks that typically win are the ones who can play well, not just playing within the pocket, but just being able to control themselves and make throws so that the defense has to be honest up the middle. I mean, the quarterbacks who roll to their right, that is no different than a basketball player who only goes to his right and can't go to his left. If you're an NBA defense and you know that tendency that this guy can't go to his left at all, what do? You let him, you trap him. You force him to go to his left. Well, in the NFL, if they know you're going to roll out, defensive ends now are getting paid a lot of money. So there's a lot of great athletes coming out who used to be basketball players, who maybe played some volleyball, maybe played baseball, whatever, and they are playing defensive end or pass rusher, quote unquote, from high school on, because they know there's money in that. Just like being a DB. There's lots of DBs out there now. So it's the whole defensive mindset in the NFL now is give me a bunch of DBs and pass rushers. And we're going to force these running quarterbacks to stay in the pocket, or when they roll out, we're going to get on top of them, make them make bad decisions. And Jones hasn't been doing that this year. He hasn't been making those bad decisions. He hasn't been forced into a lot. He's been able to make plays. But credit to the line, they played well the other day. So I don't want to keep this rambling on and on. I just thought it was important. I wanted to make the statement that I've been very impressed with the way they've built this team, the way they've put it together. On the other side of town or the other side of the building, Florham Park, I'm disappointed in the Jets. I'm disappointed in their coach. I'm disappointed in their coach for the fact that his team wasn't prepared. They got pushed around by the Seahawks. I'm also very disappointed that they played an injured Mike White. They didn't play Mike White early in the year, but they play him when his ribs are broken. He clearly wasn't himself. I'm disappointed with how he feverishly defends Zach Wilson, but I never hear him defending Mike White. No votes of confidence or nothing. Let me tell you what's going to happen with Mike White. Make this very simple. There's a lot of fans that don't want to hear his name anymore because they think he was a fad. So what he's going to do is he's a free agent. He's going to go to Carolina, New Orleans, or Atlanta. I've been saying that all season. He's going to go to one of those teams because they're going to give him the starting job, or he's going to beat out whatever crappy quarterback they have in the building. And then he's going to produce for them, and the Jets are going to be stuck with Zach Wilson and whoever they sign, who's probably going to be Baker Mayfield or Derek Carr, which means the Jets are going to tie up some of their money in a veteran quarterback who nobody else wanted, and they're not going to get any better. You have a quarterback in the building. You just don't treat him like your quarterback. And let's just say that this guy is no more than the Nick Foles was to the Eagles. That's pretty good. Nick Foles was great for the Eagles, and they rushed him out of there. Mike White can play for the Jets. I think he's going to play well somewhere else, but Mike White can play for the Jets, and they don't want him there for some reason. They want to play footsie with Zach Wilson, and then they want to rush to get Baker Mayfield, who's proven nothing in the NFL. Nothing. And then they're going to go out and spend money on Derek Carr. Why are the Raiders getting rid of Derek Carr if he's so great? I mean, are you just the stupidest one in the building or what? If I'm the Jets, look across the building and say, copy everything the Giants are doing because we're doing it wrong. I mean, look at the difference. The Giants show up, biggest game of the year, and they play above their talent. They punch above their weight. The Jets come in, they play a Seahawks team that they should be able to beat, and of course they get killed. Of course. And their coach was real tough early in the year talking about receipts. Well, I got mine. You ready, bro? Because I got mine. If I'm the owner of the Jets, and I actually like Robert Saleh's personality, but if I'm the owner of the Jets, I have to really consider getting some knee pads out and going down to New Orleans or Dallas or wherever Sean Payton lives and doing anything it takes to get that guy to come to New Jersey. Anything. Give him a percentage of the team, pay him, give him the John Gruden deal. Give him 5% of the team, $100 million or something. I don't know. Whatever he wants. Say, what does it take to get you to coach this team? Because the Jets never have a proven offensive coach who can handle or develop a quarterback. And he might walk in the building and say, I don't want Zach Wilson. I've seen enough. Well, listen to him. He knows what he's talking about. He might say, I actually can work with Mike White, and then we could draft somebody later. But the Jets need to get somebody in the building who can work with the quarterbacks and the offense. They've had enough first-time coaches. They've had enough defensive-minded coaches. It hasn't worked for them. I don't think Joe Douglas is bad. I think he had a great draft, and that draft justifies his job and that he should continue and get another shot. But I'm not sure about Robert Saleh. I'm not 100% about him. I don't know if it's game over for that guy, but I hate the way he talks about Zach Wilson with such reverence and how he does not speak a word for Mike White. The guy played with broken freaking ribs. He put his career on the line for you. And what does he get? Nothing. And they're either going to cut him or they're going to bring him back as a backup. And if I'm him, I'm out the door. I'm not re-signing with the Jets. I'd be like, you guys want to date Zach Wilson? Go ahead. I'm going to Carolina. I'm going to New Orleans. I'm going to Atlanta. They're going to pay me a salary, and a real one, and I'm going to go out there, and I'm going to win football games for them. and let's see what teams do better over the next couple of years. This is not the first time the Jets have had a talented team. They had a talented team under Rex. They had a talented team in the early 2000s, you know. It's not like they've never had talent before. They've had talent. They were great in 1998, and they didn't do shit in 1999. So it doesn't always mean because you have talent one year that you're going to continue the next year. And that's why the attitude of the Giants makes sense. Don't just say, oh, it's house money, and we're building, and we'll be good in 4 years. You don't know that. Sometimes a team makes a run when they make a run. Sometimes it's over. You got to take advantage when you have it. That's the point. You have to take advantage when you have it. You may not have it next year. You could have severe injuries next year. You could just be outplayed next year. The ball could just not bounce your way. So every opportunity to win, you have to take advantage. And the Jets didn't do that. Maybe this is the best team the Jets will have for the next 10 years. You don't know. There's no guarantee they'll be back next year with this unit. How do you know more guys don't blow out their ACLs? How do you know somebody doesn't get arrested? How do you know that other teams just don't improve a lot before you? You're thinking you're going to get a quarterback that's going to help you. Maybe someone else gets a quarterback that helps them and makes them better than you. And so instead of you being in the playoffs, you miss by a game. There's all kinds of things that can happen. So you got to take advantage when you have the opportunity, and the Jets didn't do that. Hopefully, they can get it together, whether it's bringing in another coach, whether it's securing the quarterback and giving him a chance to really work with the offense as the number one, moving on from Wilson if they can't develop him. Because that's the other thing. Let's pretend that I like Zach Wilson. I could care less about what they do with him. I'm not sold on him, but here's another point that I never hear brought up. There's a chance that the Jets just cannot develop him. There's a chance that he would be better off for himself getting out of the Jets organization. Yeah, they have receivers. They have running backs. They have a line. They have a defense, all that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But they have never proven in their last 60 years, they have not proven they could develop a quarterback. Okay? They brought in Testaverde. I guess O'Brien or whatever was pretty good. And then, obviously Joe Namath. But, in reality, they really haven't developed anyone. Sanchez, did they develop him? No, he was what he was out of college. So that's it. He didn't develop into anything else with the Jets. He didn't improve. So the problem that I have and the question I have is I think it may be better off for the Jets to move on from Wilson because maybe they need to reflect and say, and this is the owner saying, listen, I like Joe Douglas and I like the coach, but I know their weakness is they cannot develop this kid. So I'm going to tell them that I would prefer they work with a veteran, work with a guy who's already at a level that's good enough to get this team over the hump, and forget about Zach Wilson because they can't develop him. There's always this assumption that if they keep a guy, that it'll work out, that they'll develop him. You don't know that. The Jets haven't been able to do that. So maybe the Jets are better off trading him to the Broncos, trading him to, trade him to the Rams, trade him to trade him wherever. Maybe the Jets are better off trading him away so that he can develop somewhere else. They can get picks back, which they could use to help with the offensive line. It's not 100% that if you keep a guy in the building, he'll get better. You have to be able to do that. You have to have the quarterback coaches. You have to have the trainers. You have to have the offensive coordinator. But maybe what they have in the building is good enough to develop the rest of the team. Good enough to develop the Quinnen Williams of the world, the Lawsons of the world. Good enough to develop the Sauce Gardners of the world, the Garrett Wilsons of the world, the Breece Halls of the world. So maybe that's what you are. That's what you are. You're a team that can develop the other players, the other positions, and you need a Mike White type
who is already at a level that's good enough to help you win football games when he's healthy. So get an offensive line so they don't break his ribs. That may be the path forward for the Jets. But this assumption that they have to keep this guy and develop him, I don't know that they can do that. They haven't proven they can develop anybody. So that may be the problem for them. But until they can fix the quarterback position with some stability in production, and until the coach can get this team ready to play in big games and take advantage of their opportunities, they're never going to have fun like I do here in the Corner Arcade.